clear it out, right? So, easiest way to remember this, like, for misfire procedures and everything else, like, this is one giant Lego piece, in my opinion. And as we take this apart, you guys will see that, for those of you that haven't seen these for quite some time. But misfire procedures, like every other weapon system, essentially very, very similar to the T40 in many ways. Just a lot bigger parts and pieces. It fires from the open bolt. Misfire procedures, the only thing that's different is it's HEDP, and easiest way to remember it is instead of 5, because I'm putting like my hand on the charging assembly, instead of 5 fingers, 5 seconds, I have 10 fingers on 10 seconds. That's how long I wait for like hang fire, misfire procedures, so on and so forth. So first thing we do when we come to the weapon system is clear it out. Just drop both charger assemblies, pull them to the rear, one forward and up, and then I'm going to put my weapon on safe. And then I'm going to check and see if, like, we were firing this, for instance, the round would come back and potentially drop off the face of the bolt. If not, like, that's when my A gunner would catch it. But if not, I'm going to go look in there. Nothing's on the face of the bolt, so I can clear it out. If you're done firing, it's going to have that spent casing still stuck on the face of the bolt. And then just take your T-handle across to the base, like the back of that casing, slide it back to the rear of the bolt. You don't need to stick it all the way through. Just stick it till it's on the top, and then just pop it off, and it'll fall off. From there, you can go ahead and clear it out as normal. Sweep, visually, physically inspect. If you still have rounds out for like clearing out procedures, and you had a misfire, you have your primary and secondary holders right there. The secondary is kind of hard to get into, but if you guys want to take a look, go around. They're kind of way up in there by the front of the barrel. It's a little bit more difficult to press, but that's what you have your A gunner there for, and then these other ones are literally right underneath, so it could be a little bit more difficult for you guys. Once it's all cleared out, I physically inspect it. I put my hand up through to make sure nothing's in there, or you can just get up and look. I'm just going to write it home. So now we have the weapon system clear out, we can begin to go through disassembly procedures. So we're going to utilize this to pop out the rear, but the easiest way to do all of this is you work from the front to the back. So we have already cleared this weapon system out. First thing you do is you're just going to like karate chop this, which this right here you will utilize and keep on your person because this will come in handy later on. So this is your secondary drive lever. From there, you need to have, similar to an ammo can, you need to have your top cover completely 90 degrees. You're going to take out your top cover pins or retaining pins. Blade facing up, stick your 2 pins in its home, which is that hole. Everything that's shiny essentially goes facing up. Now you got your feeder, your feed tray essentially. Everything that's shiny facing up. Now this is where you pop with this little tool. You get your round alignment guide. There's like a little spring on the back side of here, just a little bit of tension. So if it's not going to come out by your hand, like pulling it out, you stick this piece, your secondary drive lever, in there, and you'll pop this thing out, which sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's easy. There you go. So this is that little pin, or little spring essentially, that has a little bit of tension on it. Not a whole lot, just a little bit, and you just pop it out. From there, you can take your ogive plunger out, and then your little diving board. All you got to do is push it in, push it forward, and then pull it out. So your ogive plunger and then your round positioning block. From there, that's everything that is in the front of the gun. Now you're ready to make your way to the back. You can still maintain this if you want, or you can keep it down. You can utilize the punch rod. This should be all the way in, which it's not, but it's fine. But you would get hit on that. So you can keep it and use it. Some people use it as a hammer. Like I said, it's frowned upon sometimes. Just punch that out. It wasn't hard to do that at all, actually. Maintain that if you want. Stick it in your boot, stick it in your hand. Doesn't really matter. You're going to pull the bolt out now. Just literally pull the thing straight to the rear, and you're going to set it up on its front. Whenever you go to put this back in, though, take note of the cocking lever right here. Sometimes if it's stuck up, which this one's pretty good, it won't go in all the way, and you'll be sitting there trying to jam your hands and jam your fingers. So just make sure that you check your cocking lever. make sure that it's facing forward. Now we're ready to get into the vertical cam assembly and the primary drive lever. So look to the rear if everybody wants to come around. There's this little slide right here, and this, you just literally put 2 fingers up on the both sides of the vertical cam assembly, and I'll pull it out so you guys can see, but you have your primary drive lever and then your vertical cam assembly. So what makes your vertical cam assembly and your primary drive lever stick together is this little metal bar. Like, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. It just closes the gap essentially to hold it in its place, and then the bolt actually being in there where it sits and rests is where it actually gets held in all together. So this right here, once again for the people back in the rear, is essentially what needs to be pulled to the rear whenever we push it in, or whenever we take it out as well. And then for it to actually seat, we push it all the way forward, and that essentially locks this up and in whenever it's actually seated in. Yep, that just happened. Delete that. So that essentially locks it up and in whenever it's actually inside of the weapon system. Once again, tidy pieces up. Now for those of us that have like no nails or like difficulty doing these things, I always just have the T&E off because it makes it a little bit simpler. And then you can take out your rear retaining pin as well, because this is where you essentially keep the weapon system lifted up the entire time. And now you get to take out your charger assemblies, which you just pull these 2 pins off in the front. And if you're unable to get it with your nails or your fingertips, which sometimes it sucks a lot, this is what gets a lot of guys on the time, especially because it's freezing cold out. Yeah, it's probably not going to work either, but
can you use a multi-tool or anything to help pry it out?
yeah, if you have one available. But there we go, good grief. I'm just gonna take one off. But anyway, once you get it off, you can stick them down in here, facing up, because you're going to get access to them later. So one on each side, and that's gonna help you for like time purposes, because I just spent 20 minutes on that. Now you go back to your sear. Once again, another little tiny knob up in the front. I'll show you guys in a second. And you're gonna pull that out with your finger, push down on the actual safety part, and then from there, you just press up tight and rotate. And now you are fully disassembled. Once that, some people do like safe fire, just to make sure that it's like function checked. But this is essentially the little spring that you pull out, as you can see underneath there, protruding just a little bit as I press it. That is what you need to grab with your fingernail or something that you're able to, and then push down on that rear piece and just rotate all the way 90 degrees and it'll pull out. Same thing when it's going in, pushing it up at 90 degrees again, and it'll get stuck as you go to rotate it. So from here, just press down on that sear and continue to rotate, and it's in. Now your charge assemblies, you just need to line up in the rear. There's a slot for them, and then in the front. So the easiest way to do it is just go from the front, or to the rear, line it up, make sure it's good, and then in the front, and then slide it forward. So you saw, like, for some of you back there probably couldn't see it, but whenever you put the tension on the actual sides, it would protrude the little other pin. So that's how you know it's in, or essentially about to go in. So just pressing it in and then forward. So once you press it in and forward, then you're gonna go ahead and actually finish locking in your mark with that rear retaining pin for the cradle. And that's just gonna help you guys for the remainder. You can also just try to get that T&E in. I just usually keep it off, but we're gonna make ourselves some money here. All right, now we're able to essentially work, once again, the reverse order that we started. Put my vertical cam in. Lining it up with the little notch up here in the front. Line it up with the notch, making sure I guide it in. Now that is in, going back with the big piece, because once again, this has to go into there. That is where this home is for the secondary drive lever. Going in from the front to the rear, make sure that you guys don't bump this out. It happens a lot, so just being cautious, holding your thumb there, and then keeping your 2 fingers on that silver piece, on that pin, guide it in, push it up with your pointer finger, it snaps in. Now you're good to essentially push that bar with that little slide lever forward, and that holds it in there. Now on your bolt, once again, that sear is going to come into play. So as you slide your bolt in, not only do you got to watch for your cocking lever, but you have to depress your safety or your sear. So you'll get it in halfway, it'll stop. This is where a lot of guys get their fingers bit. So it'll go in to there, pressing down on that sear, goes in again, then I press it again, and it goes all the way forward. Now I'm able to take my pin, push it in, it's all the way in, it's seated. Now I'm able to go to the front and start working my way, once again, in that reverse order. So I usually pick up quite a few pieces at the same time. Put your little diving board in, your ogive plunger, and then your round alignment guide. Stick it in its hole and slide it over, and it's good. Now you can pick up your last 3 pieces, literally set your tray right on top where it looks like it makes sense, where it fits, trying to put the Lego pieces back together. If you look over on the right side, easiest way to remember for your actual feeder is that there's a spring on this side and there's a spring right here. So making sure that those 2 line up, where there's a spot for it to go, like these 2 little notches on the side, there's 2 little cutouts. So if you're trying to do all of this and you're freaking out, just look at the notches, look at the cutouts, drop it, slide it. Now this will actually go into here. That is where the front part of this connects, for it to actually connect into the secondary drive lever and the top cover, which this all helps actually with the operation systems of the weapon. So there's that little notch in there. That is essentially where that goes. The only little knob sticking up underneath there. Set it, slide it. Now you're able to put your top cover on. This is also what gets a lot of guys, making sure that it's vertical at 90. And then there's 2 little notches on your retaining pins as well. So they go in, and then you can twist them once they are in. So once they are in, just give them a little twist, just to make sure that they don't come out. Good. Now you lift this up, stick that in its home, and then whenever you close your top cover, in order to do a proper function check and make sure that the weapon system properly feeds and does what it's supposed to, making sure that your secondary drive lever is to the right, or the easiest way to remember it, because people get confused with the right and the left, is just do what makes sense if there are rounds there. Will the rounds get fed over with the feeder if the claws are to the right? No. You need to make sure that the claws are to the left, the secondary drive lever is to the right. So that's how I remember it. Hey, the claws are going to grab it and feed it over, so making sure that those are to the left. Now I'm able to close the top cover and do my functions check. Functions check, pulling the bolt to the rear, put it on safe, fire, doesn't fire, maintaining positive control, then fire, and it should fire and right at home. And that is function check complete. To load this, You can load it two ways. You can load it top cover closed or top cover open, ensuring that you have your feed thrown on. Just depressing these two little springs, one on the top, one on the bottom. Putting it in, and if it doesn't go in, just touch the top ones and pop them in. To load this up through, female end down, which you guys will be able to see that whenever you actually get the rounds. And then from there, sliding across, and you will hear a distinct click whenever they are actually properly loaded. So sliding them across the primary round like holders, and then you have your secondary round holder. That's just going to allow the weapon system to slide across whenever the feeding process begins to go from condition 3 to condition 2. We're just going to walk through the operation system. So it's loaded on the primaries, or the secondaries, excuse me, and then as the bolt essentially gets pulled to the rear, these will slide over because it lines up in that little notch on the top of the primary feeder, or the primary drive lever, and then the feeder will slide across, sliding those rounds or that entire belt across the primary and pushing it against the round positioning block. So the round alignment guide essentially guides those rounds as they are in the actual feed tray and then against the round positioning block. From there, we'll go through like how this weapon system actually functions. So now I pull the bolt to the rear and that action occurs. They slide over and my bolt is going to the rear. This slides to the left while that goes to the right. From there, the round is across, resting against the round positioning block. Now, whenever we actually go to load this thing, we will actually fire it, slamming the bolt forward. Like no maintaining positive control and riding it forward because we're actually trying to load this thing now. What that does is enough force or pressure is generated in order to grasp that round. So now it is grasped by the extractors. The extractors being right here at the top part of the bolt. Now we saw how the vertical cam assembly kind of dips down.